If you never stop to reflect, you can work hard for years and still waste time building the wrong thing. You can grind, you can sacrifice, you can stay busy, you can tell yourself you're being disciplined, and still walk straight back into the same patterns that keep holding you back. That's why reflection matters. Because effort without reflection doesn't always produce growth. Sometimes it only produces exhaustion. Welcome to the Rebellious Remedy. I'm Jonathan Ennis, founder of Dream Root Wellness. Here we return to Christ as the foundation of true health, body, mind, heart, and spirit, so we can steward our lives in faithful obedience to God's design. If you're ready to walk this out with others, you're invited to join the Dream Root Wellness Network. Join today at community.dreamrootwellness.com. Welcome back. Last week we talked about assessment. We talked about checking your direction while you're still moving. We talked about noticing drift before it becomes damage. We talked about course correcting in real time. But this week is different. This week, we're talking about reflection. And reflection matters because effort alone isn't enough. You can do the work, you can hit the goal, you can survive the season and still learn nothing from it. That's the danger. Because if you don't stop long enough to ask what the season taught you, you don't become wiser, you just become tired. So here's the question. What did this season teach you? Not just what happened, not just how you felt about what happened, not just what you wish had happened. What did it teach you? Because a lot of people do the work, hit a checkpoint, make a little progress, and move on too fast. They never ask, what actually worked? What didn't? What do I need to repeat? What do I need to stop doing? What pattern keeps following me? What kind of person am I becoming through this process? And when people skip that step, they repeat the same mistakes, not because they don't care, not because they refuse to try, because they never slowed down enough to turn experience into wisdom. That's what reflection does. It helps you own your wins, learn from your losses, and level up. That's the work today. Reflection isn't just looking back. Everybody looks back. That part's easy. The hard part is looking back honestly enough to move forward wiser. That's the difference. A lot of people don't reflect. They ruminate. They replay frustration. They replay disappointment. They replay failure. They replay the conversation. They replay the moment they wish they handled differently over and over and over. And that's not reflection. That's mental punishment. Reflection is different. Reflection is disciplined. Reflection asks hard questions and stays honest enough to answer them. That kind of reflection is powerful because it keeps you from wasting what you just walked through. And I know that personally. There was a season in the early years of Dream Root Wellness where I was working hard. I was building curriculum, writing lessons, structuring frameworks, trying to make the thing valuable. But if I'm honest, I wasn't moving the needle on the things that actually build a business. I wasn't building systems. I wasn't learning advertising and marketing the way I needed to. I wasn't developing my brand voice. I wasn't building an audience. I wasn't converting that audience into people who actually cared about the mission God had placed in my heart, restoring health and wellness within the body of Christ as stewardship under Christ. And the lie I kept telling myself was simple. I need to finish the curriculum first. That sounded responsible. It sounded disciplined. It sounded like preparation. But reflection later showed me the truth. The curriculum didn't matter if there was nobody there to use it. I'd spent years building something in private while neglecting the work that would actually allow it to serve people. That's a hard thing to admit, but it taught me something I'll never forget. You can work hard on the wrong thing and still call it faithfulness. You can confuse preparation with avoidance. You can keep polishing something nobody sees and tell yourself you're making progress. But reflection cuts through that. Reflection asks, Is this actually producing fruit? Is this obedience? Or am I hiding behind work that feels safer than the work I really need to do? That's why this matters. Whether the season went well or poorly, there's something to learn. A successful season teaches you what to repeat. A difficult season teaches you what to repair. A failed season teaches you what to confront. But if you never stop and pay attention to the lesson, you'll probably have to learn it again and again and again. Some of the pain people keep calling bad luck is really repeated instruction. They keep walking into the same lesson because they refuse to sit down and learn from it. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think growth comes from doing more effort, more intensity, more content, more workouts, more plans, more goals. But growth isn't just doing. Growth is learning. Learning what builds you, learning what weakens you, learning what works in real life, not just in theory. Learning where you keep lying to yourself, learning where your strengths actually are, learning what kind of pressure exposes the weak spots in your plans. That's why reflection matters. Without reflection, people stay stuck in cycles. They work hard, they get frustrated, they start over, they repeat. And then they wonder why nothing changes. But the pattern is obvious. They're moving, but they're not learning. Scripture says in Proverbs chapter 27, verse 23, "Be sure to know the state of your flocks and pay close attention to your herds." That's stewardship. Pay attention. Take stock. Know what's actually going on. Don't live carelessly with what God has entrusted to you. And that absolutely applies here. Your body, mind, and your heart has been entrusted to you. Your habits and time have been entrusted to you. Your calling and growth has been entrusted to you. So the question isn't, am I busy? The question is, what's the true state of what I'm building? Because if you don't know the state of what you're building, you can't steward it well. I had to learn that the hard way, in business, in health, in faith, and in my own story. Now, this is where we need clarity. Assessment and reflection are related, but they aren't the same thing. Assessment happens in motion. Reflection happens after the fact. That's the cleanest way to understand it. Assessment is the mid-journey course correction. Reflection is the post-journey debrief. Assessment asks, what needs to change right now? Reflection asks, what do I need to learn from this season so I can build better moving forward? Let me make it concrete. If I knock a coffee mug off of my desk, assessment is what lets me reach out and catch it before it hits the floor. I see what's happening. I respond in real time. I prevent the mess from getting worse. That's assessment. Reflection comes later. Reflection is when I ask, why was the mug sitting so close to the edge in the first place? Why does this keep happening? What was careless about the setup? What needs to change so I don't have to keep making the same save over and over? That's reflection. Assessment helps you stay on track. Reflection helps you level up. You need both. If you skip assessment, you drift. If you skip reflection, you repeat yourself. And a lot of people are repeating themselves. Same health goals, same excuses, same emotional reactions, same spiritual inconsistency, same scattered routines, same restart every Monday. That's not because they're hopeless. It's because they haven't slowed down enough to examine the pattern. For me, one of the clearest mugs too close to the edge has been weight management. I'm good at losing weight, but honestly, I'm probably even better at putting it back on. Maybe some of you can relate. And if you've lived that cycle, you know exactly what I mean. There are warning signs. I stop avoiding processed garbage food. I start snacking more. I start telling myself, it's just today. Tomorrow I'll get back on the wagon. Then I say that again tomorrow and the next day and the next week. And before long, my belt fits tighter. My back feels stiffer. My energy drops. And I look in the mirror and I see a version of myself I thought I'd already eliminated. Here's the truth. Fat John will always be in me. Given the chance, he'll come back out. That's not self-hatred. It's honest reflection. That's knowing the state of my flocks. That's paying attention to what God has entrusted to me. So I have to keep asking, am I still on the right track? Am I being honest about my diet? Am I being honest about my exercise? Am I hitting my daily targets? How do I feel? Do I need to course correct right now? That's assessment, but reflection goes deeper. Reflection asks, why does this pattern keep returning? What lie am I believing again? Where did I start negotiating with the old version of myself? And what structure do I need in place so I stop acting surprised by a pattern I already know? That's the difference. Assessment catches the mug. Reflection moves the mug away from the edge. Now listen closely. Reflection isn't an excuse to beat yourself up. Some people hear reflection and immediately turn it into self-criticism. They replay everything they did wrong, everything they missed, everything that frustrated them, everything they wish had gone better. Then they call that honesty. It isn't honesty. Reflection isn't about punishing yourself. It isn't about staring at your failures until you feel terrible. It isn't about perfectionism. It isn't about turning every shortcoming into some dramatic indictment of who you are. Reflection is about growth. So yes, reflection requires honesty, but it also requires perspective. Because if something went well, you need to acknowledge that too. Don't skip your wins. A lot of people do. I've done this. I've dismissed the small things that were actually building momentum. Walking 8,000 steps, resistance training for 15 minutes, getting those small workouts in when they didn't feel impressive, posting content consistently when the audience was still small, praying daily when there was no dramatic emotional high. Those things don't always feel like big wins in the moment, but they compound. And since becoming more consistent with walking and resistance training, I've seen gradual growth in my physique, my strength, and my energy. Since becoming more consistent with content, I've seen gradual growth in my audience. Since becoming more consistent in prayer, I've felt more grounded and rooted in my faith. Those are wins, not because they're flashy, because they're faithful. And if you dismiss every quiet win because it isn't dramatic enough, you'll train yourself to miss the fruit God is actually growing. A lot of people minimize progress. They dismiss small victories. They refuse to give thanks for growth because they're too focused on what's still unfinished. That's not humility. That's poor stewardship. Small wins matter. More consistency matters. More awareness matters. Better choices matter. Stronger follow-through matters. A calmer response matters. A little more discipline, a little more peace. Those things matter. If you want to grow wisely, you have to name both sides, what went wrong and what went right, because both sides teach you. One shows you what needs to change. The other shows you what needs to continue. Some seasons take time to understand. When I look back on my paramedic years, I see things now that I couldn't see clearly while I was living them. At the time, I thought I was grinding. I thought I was sacrificing. I thought I was doing what had to be done. And in some ways, I was. But I was also barely sleeping. The sleep I did get was restless. I was eating garbage. I wasn't exercising regularly outside of the activity I got at work. My mindset was negative. I used to tell myself, you can sleep when you're dead. And I meant it. That's how I pushed through. But looking back now, I can see that that wasn't real strength. It was just survival. And survival isn't the same thing as stewardship. That season also revealed something about my marriage and home life. My wife and I wanted to have a family, but living that way, we couldn't see how that would even be possible. I was overworked, underpaid, unhealthy, exhausted, and stuck in a way of living that couldn't continue. So eventually I went back to school. I had a bachelor's degree in emergency medical care from Eastern Kentucky University, but I still had to take a few prerequisite classes at a nearby community college just to meet the entry requirements for the only PA program I planned to apply to. I took those classes while I kept working, Then I applied to the PA program at Sullivan University in Louisville, Kentucky. I got an interview, and I remember being excited that I was even being considered. But the interview didn't go the way I hoped. The program director pressed hard on my background as a paramedic. She basically told me paramedics are notoriously hard to teach, that paramedics think they already know everything, that she didn't know whether I could succeed in the program. And I remember sitting there feeling the air just come out of me. I left that interview thinking I had no chance. A few weeks later, the letter came. Sullivan University, College of Health Sciences, Department of Physician Assistant Studies. I was sick to my stomach before I opened it. I read it, then I read it again, and I'd been waitlisted. And my first response wasn't faith. It was defeat. I basically said to myself and to God, well, I guess this just isn't the plan for me. And at that point, I resigned myself to the idea that my future was probably going to be working multiple jobs as a paramedic, trying to earn enough money to support the family I wanted to have. Then, not long after that, I interviewed with a respected EMS agency in Kentucky. It had a good reputation, better pay, better work-life balance than most places I'd worked before, really probably every place. At least in that moment, I thought, maybe this is my break. Maybe I can make this work. But within the first few weeks, I knew something was wrong. Practically everyone at that service didn't want me there. One of the other paramedics told me directly, everyone wanted so-and-so to have this job, not you. People are pretty upset about it. And I could feel it. Then my trainer started changing the goalpost on me. We'd run a call, and afterward he'd tell me, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you should have done it this way. So on the next call, I'd follow his suggestions exactly. Then he'd tell me I was still doing it wrong and should have done it the other way, the same way I'd done it before. After about a month of that, my supervisor pulled me aside and took me into the director's office. That's where they told me I was being fired. They explained that they could go through the whole process of removing me from the position, which would involve multiple council meetings and could take months, or I could make it easier on everyone and resign. And I did, no questions asked, because I didn't want to stay somewhere I was clearly not wanted. In the moment, that hurt. I was angry. I was embarrassed. I felt inadequate. I'd always thought of myself as a good employee, a good paramedic, a good person, and failing to thrive in that role felt like a personal indictment. But here's the part they didn't know. About a week before that meeting, I'd received a call from Sullivan University. Someone had dropped out of the PA program. A spot had opened. They asked if I was still interested, and I said, yeah. They said, great, the program starts in 4 weeks. So in one sense, I had an ace up my sleeve, but emotionally, I still had to deal with that failure, because even when God is redirecting you, rejection can still hurt. For a long time, I looked back on that story and mostly saw how poorly I'd been treated. And yes, I do think I was treated poorly, but reflection eventually forced me to see more than that. I had to admit that I was burned out. I was living defeated. I wasn't pushing myself to be better at what I was doing. I wasn't performing at my peak as a paramedic. And maybe the deeper truth was this: I didn't belong on that path anymore. That's what reflection helped me see. At the time, it felt like rejection. Looking back, I can see redirection. If everything had gone well at that EMS job, if I'd been treated well, if I'd been performing at the top of my game, if I'd been comfortable there, I honestly don't know if I would have answered that phone call from the PA program. I might have stayed right where I was, but God used that painful season to move me on. One path was closing, another path was opening, and I couldn't see that clearly while I was standing in the middle of it. That's why reflection matters, because emotion can tell you what something felt like, but reflection helps you ask what God may have been teaching through it. It doesn't deny the pain. It doesn't pretend the season was easier than it was. It doesn't force you to call something good that was genuinely hard. But it helps you ask, what did God teach me there? What did that season expose? What did that pressure reveal? Where did it redirect me? What wisdom can I carry forward now? That's reflection. So what does real reflection sound like? It sounds like truth, not excuses, not fake positivity, not vague emotion, truth. Something like this. I set out to grow in this area. Here's what I hope to achieve. Here's what actually happened. Here's what helped. Here's what got in the way. Here's what I learned. Here's what I'm going to carry forward. That's reflection. Notice what it does. It doesn't leave you trapped in the past. It takes the past and turns it into material for wiser action. That's the whole point. Because if you're serious about health and wellness, then every season has to become instruction. The good seasons, the hard seasons, the slow seasons, the disappointing seasons, the seasons where you did better than before, the seasons where you saw how far you still have to go. None of it has to be wasted, but it'll be wasted if you refuse to learn from it. So let's make this practical. There are 4 things that make reflection useful. And if you miss these, reflection becomes vague, emotional, and easy to ignore. Number 1, be honest. Start there. Tell the truth. If something didn't work, say that. If you were inconsistent, say that. If the goal was unrealistic, say that. If pride got in the way, say that. If you made progress, say that too. Reflection only works when it's honest, not dramatic, not cruel, honest. Number 2, acknowledge the wins. Don't skip this. Ask what went well, what habit helped, what strategy worked, what response was stronger than it used to be, what area shows real evidence of growth. Even small steps forward matter. And if you never recognize progress, you'll starve yourself of encouragement. Worse than that, you may miss the evidence that God is doing something in you. Don't call unfinished growth no growth. That's a lie. Number 3, spot the patterns. This one matters most. What keeps repeating? What roadblocks keep showing up? What habits keep breaking down? What emotional triggers keep interfering? What excuses keep resurfacing? What circumstances consistently throw you off track? Patterns matter because patterns reveal the real work. If the same thing keeps happening, stop acting surprised by it. Start addressing it directly. If every weekend destroys your nutrition, stop being shocked on Monday. If every stressful day destroys your evening routine, stop pretending stress is random. If every emotional trigger sends you into the same reaction, stop calling it just how I am. If every season of progress turns into complacency, stop pretending you don't know what happens next. That's the pattern. And once you see the pattern, you're responsible for what you do with it. I've seen this in my own life. Overworking has followed me through multiple seasons. It was there when I was a paramedic, and it still tries to show up now in business. I'll sacrifice sleep to work on content scripts. I'll keep editing and scheduling posts. I'll keep going back over something that should have already been done. One last time, I'll say, one more pass. Let me make sure it's aligned. And sometimes that's excellence, but sometimes it's overanalysis. Sometimes it's overcomplication. Sometimes it's me burning time I should be using to rest, recover, and be present. That pattern also shows up in health. I start strong, I accomplish goals, then I grow complacent and slowly backslide. Then I wake up weeks or months later frustrated that I'm fighting the same battle again. Reflection helps me name that, not to shame myself, but to deal with it. Number 4, take action. Reflection without adjustment is just hindsight. Interesting hindsight, maybe, but still hindsight. The point of reflection isn't to understand the past better. The point is to build the future better. So ask, what will I do differently next time? What needs to change? What needs to stay? What lesson am I carrying forward? What decision needs to be made now? That's how reflection becomes growth. One of the biggest lies people believe is that growth should look clean. It usually doesn't. Real growth is messy. You try, You learn, you adjust, you improve, you miss something, you see it more clearly next time, you build again. That's normal. What matters isn't whether you got everything right the first time. What matters is whether you're learning, because if you're learning, you're not stagnant. And if you're not stagnant, you're still moving. That matters. A lot of people quit too early because they interpret imperfection as failure. Imperfection is normal. Refusing to learn from it is where stagnation sets in. Don't quit because the process exposed what still needs work. That's part of the gift. The exposure isn't the end, it's the invitation to grow. And for me, that's been true in weight loss too. In 2020, I lost a lot of weight. But since then, I've cycled through weight gain and weight loss multiple times. Truthfully, even before 2020. Why? Because old patterns don't disappear just because you beat them once. Processed food starts creeping back in. Stress eating starts creeping back in. Lack of self-control starts creeping back in. Then the lie shows up. Well, I can't live like this forever. I can't stay this consistent with exercise and diet forever. At some point, I have to eat normally again. Besides, it will just be for one day. But that's not wisdom. That's a cop-out. That's me trying to negotiate my way out of discipline. And more recently, I've been more dialed in with daily habits, with a system, with community, with accountability, and I've seen the difference again. My weight improves, my physique improves, my energy improves. And being the face of a wellness business adds another layer of accountability because I can't preach stewardship while refusing to practice it. Not perfectly, but consistently. That's why I can say with conviction, the stewardship mandate works. The tree of wellness works. The evergreens of wellness work. These are all the systems I've built into Dreamroot Wellness. Tools to help with health and wellness growth rooted in Christ. Not because they're magic, because when you actually live them, they force you to practice the things that produce growth, integrity, wisdom, discipline, perseverance, balance, community, faithful daily action. Now, here's your assignment. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't turn this into a 3-hour journal session unless you need that. Keep it simple. Keep it honest. Your task is to step back and reflect on one area of your health and wellness journey, not just what happened, what you learned. Step 1, choose one goal, checkpoint, or season. Pick one area where you've recently been making effort. It could be improving sleep, building a workout routine, growing in mental focus, strengthening emotional steadiness, becoming more consistent spiritually, or improving your daily rhythm overall. Choose one, not 5, one. Clarity starts with focus. Step 2, ask the hard questions. Write your answers to these. What did I hope to achieve? Did I accomplish it? What worked well? What didn't work as expected? What held me back? What did I learn about myself? What will I do differently next time? Keep it honest, not polished, just honest. Here's what that could sound like. I set out to improve my nutrition and build more consistency with movement. I didn't progress as quickly as I wanted, but I became more aware of my habits and started making better choices. My biggest obstacle was time management. So next time, I need to prepare better and protect the habits that matter instead of squeezing them in when I feel like it. That's useful reflection. It's specific, it's honest, it names the lesson, and it points toward action. Step 3, name the growth. Ask, how have I grown through this process? Even if the outcome wasn't what you wanted, where are you stronger? Where are you wiser? Where are you more aware? Where are you more disciplined than before? Where are you seeing something now that you used to ignore? That matters too. Don't only measure the outcome, measure the formation, because God isn't only shaping what you do, He's shaping who you're becoming. Step 4, share the lesson. If you're doing this in community, bring it into the light. Share what you learned, share what challenged you, share what you're changing next. Not to perform, not to impress, to grow. because your reflection may help someone else stop repeating the same cycle. And someone else's reflection may help you see a blind spot you've been missing. That's why community matters. And I've seen this recently in my own content. For a long time, creating content felt like living on an island. You put something out, you wonder if it matters, you wonder if it helps anyone, you wonder if anybody actually cares. But lately, I've received comments from people expressing gratitude for the content. And that's reminded me that even slow growth matters. A small audience doesn't mean small impact. And I believe part of that shift happened because I started bringing more of myself into the content, more story, more honesty, more lived experience. That decision came through reflection. I had to realize that polished teaching without personal testimony can still feel distant. But when you bring the lesson into the light, someone else may see themselves in it. That matters. Now, before we close, I want to bring this back to something deeper, because reflection isn't just about improving habits. It isn't just about losing weight. It isn't just about building better routines. Sometimes reflection exposes misalignment, and that can be uncomfortable. When the earlier version of Dream Root Wellness failed, I initially told myself, I just need to learn how to communicate the value better. And that was partly true. I did need to communicate better. I did need clearer marketing. I did need a stronger brand voice, but that wasn't the deepest issue. Honest reflection over time through personal revival and conviction of the Holy Spirit revealed something far more serious. The brand and mission weren't aligned with my internal walk with God. I'd softened Christ. I'd mentioned Jesus in one small part of the curriculum while keeping the rest of the business general enough to avoid scaring people away. I told myself that would help me reach more people. I told myself that would make the message easier to receive. But what it really did was pull me out of integrity, because deep down, I believed something I wasn't boldly saying. There's no true health and wellness apart from Jesus Christ. That realization changed everything. I'd been running from what God was calling me to build. In some ways, like Jonah, I was trying to go in the opposite direction while still pretending I was being faithful. I was trying to keep Dream Root Wellness general, secular enough, soft enough, acceptable enough, but it never sat right in my spirit. And eventually I had to face it. The old version of Dream Root Wellness wasn't failing only because of marketing. It was failing because it lacked Christ-centered clarity. It wasn't aligned with the mission God had already placed in my heart. That reflection was painful, but it was necessary, because without it, I'd still be wasting my time building something nobody was ever going to see. A wishy-washy, bland, cookie-cutter wellness business that served no one. And worse than that, I'd still be running from the calling God had placed on my life. That's why reflection matters. Reflection is powerful, because if you don't reflect, you won't grow the way you could. And if you don't grow, you'll keep circling the same lessons until they wear you down. So pause, take stock, own the wins, learn from the losses, refine the plan, and move forward wiser. Your future self is counting on you to do more than try hard. He's counting on you to learn well, to align yourself with God's plan for your life. I know that's true for me, because if I hadn't learned from my past, I'd still be stuck in old patterns, still building curriculum nobody saw, still vague in the business, still afraid to build something explicitly Christ-centered, still cycling through the same health battles without owning the pattern, still telling myself I was preparing when I was really avoiding. Reflection helped me confront that, and by God's grace, it helped me move forward. That's what reflection can do. So keep growing, keep learning, keep taking ownership of your health and wellness, because real change doesn't come from doing alone. It comes from understanding what your actions produce. Now, this is an end, but it's not the end. You've walked through the tree of wellness with me. You've looked at the roots, the trunk, the branches, the sky. That matters, because the tree of wellness isn't just a framework. It's a blueprint for living in alignment with truth, integrity, and the way God designed you to thrive. But this isn't the finish line. It's one part of the journey. If you've made it this far, it's because you refuse to settle for the watered down, profit-driven health advice the enemy's systems keep pushing. You can see the pattern now. A system built to keep people sick, distracted, dependent, and you're ready to move in the opposite direction. That's why the next step is the evergreens of wellness. This is where we move from framework to faithful practice. This is where you learn the timeless, unshakable disciplines that help keep your body strong, your mind clear, your emotions steady, and your spirit rooted. Not when life is easy, not when everything is convenient, but when pressure comes, when distraction comes, when old patterns come, when you're tempted to drift. The evergreens of wellness are the practices that keep you rooted. Scripture says in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off every encumbrance and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with endurance the race set out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." That's your calling now. Keep running. Throw off what entangles. Fix your eyes on Jesus and keep building the kind of life that honors him. Next week, we begin with an overview of the evergreens of wellness. You've reflected. Now it's time to practice.